Hi there, this is Laura Rains, and today I'd like to talk to you about disclosure. As I said, my name is Laura Rains. I work for Georgia Vocational Rehabilitation Agency. My email address is laura.rains@gvs.ga.gov. That's LORA.RAINS@gvs.ga.gov. Here's a preview. Today I will talk to you about disclosure, which is talking about your disability. I'll also talk about accommodation. An accommodation is a change to help a person with a disability to work. Accommodations at school and a law called IDEA. I'll also talk about accommodations at work and a law called ADA. Also, I will talk about when to disclose a disability. What is disclosure? Disclosure is talking to someone about your disability so you can get an accommodation. So it's talking to someone for a very definite purpose, a reason. Talking to a person about your disability so that you can get a change that will help you to work. What is an accommodation? An accommodation is a change made because of a person's disability. An accommodation makes it easier for a person with a disability to work. Accommodations at school. Until you finish high school, a law called IDEA means that you get the accommodations you need at school without having to ask for them. Let's look at some examples of school accommodations. At school, you might get extra time to do work. If you get this accommodation, it has been decided that because of your disability, you may need extra time to get your work done. You might have a screen reader software to use on a computer. Your teacher may use an amplification device to help you hear better. There are many more changes at school that help people do their work without problems from their disabilities. So accommodations are changes to help a person with a disability work or learn. Some changes made to help a person who has a disability to work or to learn. Until you finish high school, your accommodations are given automatically. You do not have to ask for your accommodations. In the community or at work, your right to accommodations is protected by the ADA, the Americans with Disabilities Act. Some places you can see the ADA at work include having ramps for wheelchairs and parking for people who need to get their wheelchairs out or walk with a walker. But sometimes you have to ask for accommodations when you are not in school. While you're in school, your school records tell your teachers that you need accommodations, but those bits of information don't necessarily follow you when you are out in the community or when you are at work. So one thing to think about is disclosure in post-secondary education. Accommodations are not automatic when you leave high school. If you go to college, technical college, or university, You have to disclose your disability to get an accommodation. So how do you do that? Your school will have an office where you can talk to someone about your needed accommodations. You should visit that office and talk to someone as soon as you are accepted to attend school, if not before. The name of the office will usually include the word disability, and you can certainly ask someone at the school who at the school is in charge of working with people with disabilities. So if you get accepted to school, you should definitely go and talk to the person who is in charge of helping you get your accommodations. But even if you haven't been accepted, if you're working toward being accepted, you've made your application, or perhaps you're just visiting the campus, you can find out about that office and perhaps talk to people in that office so that when it comes time to work on getting your accommodations, you'll already know where the office is and who those people are that can help you. When should I disclose my disability? You decide whether you want to disclose your disability. You do not have to tell anyone about your disability unless you want to do that. So if you feel that as you go off to college you no longer need an accommodation, it is your choice whether you ask for that accommodation. But just remember that your teachers have to know ahead of time that you need an accommodation. You can't wait until you're in trouble with your grades at school and then ask for an accommodation. So you should let people know up front if there's a possibility that you will need an accommodation to learn well at college or technical college or university. You should also tell your boss or supervisor about a disability if you need an accommodation at work. Do not wait until you have problems to talk about your need for an accommodation. Tell your boss or supervisor before you have a problem. So as you start to learn about your new job, if you see things that will be difficult for you if you don't have an accommodation, and the difficulty will be because of your disability, that is a time that you should definitely talk to your boss or supervisor to see if you can work out an accommodation that will help you be successful on your job. What kind of accommodation could I get at work? The accommodation must be needed for you to do a good job. So it must be something that you need, not just something that you want. So for example, if you need a certain kind of chair in order to be able to work well, that might be a needed accommodation. But if you just want a different color chair because you like a different color more, then that's probably not going to be an accommodation. So your accommodation needs to be something that you need in order to do a good job. The accommodation must be reasonable. It must make sense. So it can't be something that requires the place of business to completely change how they do things so that you can work there. So it needs to be reasonable and it needs to be needed for you. And in most cases, these things are going to work out fine if you ask for the accommodation and discuss your disability with your boss or supervisor. Remember that the Americans with Disabilities Act protects your right to have accommodations that are necessary and reasonable. Here's a summary of the things I've spoken with you about. Accommodations are changes to help people work. Students get accommodations without asking until they finish high school. To disclose means to talk to someone about your disability. Outside of school, you may need to disclose your disability to get needed accommodations. Two places where you may need to disclose your disability are your post-secondary school, whatever school you may go to after you finish high school, or your job. If you need accommodations on the job, it is important to disclose that need to your boss or supervisor. Talk about your need before you have problems on the job if you can. Here's an activity. It is good to practice for disclosing your disability. Ask someone to help you practice. Let the other person pretend to be your boss or supervisor. Practice disclosing your disability and asking for an accommodation. Here's a final question for you. I would like for you to get credit for participating in this video lesson. So, if you are a Georgia high school student with a disability, please email your name and the name of your school to me, Laura Rains, at laura.rains@gvs.ga.gov. That's LORA.RAINS@gvs.ga.gov. I will let your GVRA counselor or teacher know that you participated in this video lesson. If someone from Georgia Vocational Rehabilitation Agency has already been working with you or with you and your classmates at school, then you might want to let that person know instead. So if you know how to contact your GVRA counselor or your teacher, you can let him or her know that you participated in this video lesson. Thanks for participating and have a great day.